The early 80s were the golden age of the slasher boom. But beyond the franchises and familiar masks, there was a wave of smaller, stranger, and often meaner films that slipped through the cracks. Tonight, we're diving into 10 deep cuts from 1981 to 1983, regional productions, psychological slow burns, backwoods nightmares, and holiday set body counts that define the raw edge of the era. These aren't the headliners you see on every list. They're the overlooked, the underdiscussed, and the ones that still carry that gritty late-night rental energy. Let's step back into the early 80s and revisit 10 slashers that deserve another look. Mortuary, 1982. After her father's suspicious death, a teenage girl becomes convinced something is wrong at the local funeral home handling the case. With help from her boyfriend, she starts asking questions and watching the mortician's behavior. The deeper she looks, the stranger it gets, especially when the mortician's unstable son takes a personal interest in her. The mystery unfolds through quiet snooping and uneasy encounters, rather than non-stop attacks. Much of the tension comes from uncertainty about who is dangerous and what is really happening behind closed doors. Mary Beth McDonough leads as the determined daughter, playing the role straight and grounded. Bill Paxton appears in an early screen performance as the mortician's troubled son, bringing an off-balance energy to the character. Christopher George and Linda Day George round out the central adult roles connected to the funeral home. Director Howard Avedis leans on the location for mood. Embalming rooms, viewing areas, and coffins give the film a built-in chill factor. Effects are practical and selective, with brief gore, ritual imagery, and restrained violence used to support the investigation thread. A small-scale early 80s horror mystery that relies on setting and cast more than shock value. Not flashy, but steady and atmospheric, with added interest for Paxton's early role. Curtains, 1983. A reclusive director invites a group of actresses to his isolated mansion, each competing for the same coveted role. But as tensions rise between the hopefuls, someone in a grotesque old woman mask begins stalking them one by one. What should have been a career-making opportunity turns into a fight for survival. Directed by Richard Syopka, Curtains stands out in the Canadian horror wave of the early 80s. John Vernon plays the manipulative director Jonathan Stryker, while Samantha Egger and Lynn Griffin anchor the cast of actresses caught in his twisted audition process. The film is remembered most for its chilling set pieces. A doll abandoned in the snow, a masked killer gliding across an ice rink, and dim stage lighting that turns the theater into a trap. The blend of theatrical ambition and slasher violence makes it feel both stylish and vicious. Though plagued by behind-the-scenes conflicts and uneven pacing, Curtains has earned cult status thanks to its unforgettable imagery and eerie atmosphere. It's a slasher that thrives on performance, deception, and the danger of ambition. The Dorm That Dripped Blood, 1982. On a college campus during Christmas break, a handful of students stay behind to help clean out a condemned dormitory. The quiet task quickly turns into a nightmare as an unseen killer begins stalking them through the empty halls and shadowy basements. One by one, the volunteers are picked off in grisly fashion, turning the abandoned dorm into a slaughterhouse. Directed by Stephen Carpenter and Jeffrey Obrow, The Dorm That Dripped Blood is a prime example of the early 80s slasher wave. The cast features future stars in early roles, including Daphne Zuniga, later of The Fly 2 and Spaceballs. Lori Lipinski and Steven Sachs round out the core group of students caught in the carnage. The film leans on atmosphere more than polish. The dark, echoing dorm setting creates a claustrophobic tone, while the practical effects bring a grim, gritty edge to the kills. Baseball bats, drills, and blunt instruments replace elaborate setups, keeping the violence raw and unsettling. What gives the film lasting power is its downbeat tone and infamous ending. Instead of going for slick thrills, it embraces a grim, almost nihilistic streak that sets it apart from more mainstream slashers of the era. Released under multiple titles, including Pranks, the film's raw atmosphere and grim violence made it stand out on VHS shelves. It remains a cult staple for slasher fans who appreciate their horror uncompromising and drenched in shadows. Home Sweet Home, 1981. A family gathers at a secluded house for Thanksgiving, expecting a tense but normal reunion. At the same time, a violent patient escapes from a mental institution and heads straight toward the property. The celebration turns deadly as the intruder invades the home and begins hunting the relatives one by one. The holiday backdrop adds a dark contrast, with arguments, meals, and family drama colliding with sudden violence. The large house and surrounding grounds give the killer room to move while cutting off easy escape. Director Nettie Pena builds the film as a straightforward early slasher with a seasonal hook. Jake Steinfeld plays the attacker with loud physical intensity, portraying the character as unpredictable and unusually hard to stop. The ensemble plays the family conflicts broadly, which keeps the early scenes active before the threat arrives. Vanessa Shaw appears in her film debut as one of the younger family members. Kill scenes use practical effects and simple setups, including blunt force attacks, strangulation, and electrocution gags. The intruder's drug use is mentioned as the reason for his extreme endurance and erratic behavior. An early holiday slasher curiosity that predates most Thanksgiving-themed horror, uneven but energetic, and mainly remembered for its seasonal setting and wild villain performance. Sweet 16, 1983. A teenage girl arrives in a small southern town just before her 16th birthday. As local boys start showing interest in her, they begin turning up dead. With fear spreading and rumors growing, attention shifts between suspects while the sheriff's office tries to keep control. The truth stays hidden as the birthday party draws closer. The film leans more into mystery than non-stop stalking. Interviews, town grudges, and misdirection shape the investigation, giving it a whodunit feel instead of a straight body count formula. Directed by Jim Sotos, the movie centers on Elisa Shirley as the newcomer at the heart of the story. Bo Hopkins plays the sheriff leading the case, while Patrick McNee appears as a local academic studying regional culture. The supporting cast fills out the town with layered suspicion. Violence is handled with practical effects and mostly knife-based attacks, presented directly but not excessively. The small-town setting adds pressure, with community tensions and prejudice folded into the suspect pool. A mystery-forward early 80s slasher that favors investigation over spectacle. Measured, functional, and best appreciated for its puzzle angle. Unhinged, 1982. After a car crash during a storm, 3 young women are stranded in a remote wooded area and taken in by a secluded family living in a large, aging mansion. What seems like reluctant hospitality turns uneasy fast. One of the guests vanishes, doors stay locked, and the household rules grow more disturbing by the hour. The film leans into isolation and suspicion rather than constant attacks. Most of the tension comes from behavior, secrets, and the feeling that escape is being quietly closed off. Directed by Don Gronquist, the movie plays like a low-budget gothic mystery with slasher edges. Laurel Munson leads as the most proactive of the stranded trio, alongside Janet Penner and Sarah Ansley. Virginia Settle stands out as the controlling mother figure at the center of the house. The mansion setting does most of the work. Long hallways, shadowy rooms, and heavy decor create steady unease. Violence is limited but abrupt when it happens, using practical effects for a few shock moments rather than frequent gore. A slow-burn backwoods gothic with a harsh payoff. Measured pacing, heavy atmosphere, and a reputation built on its final act brutality make it a niche but remembered cult title. X-Ray, 1982. When Susan Jeremy checks into a hospital for a routine medical exam, she ends up trapped in a sterile maze of madness. Somewhere in the building, a masked killer has switched her records and begins stalking her through endless white corridors, turning the entire hospital into a death trap of fluorescent lights and surgical steel. Also known as Hospital Massacre, this early 80s slasher takes one of the safest, most clinical environments imaginable and makes it feel deeply unsafe. Directed by Boaz Davidson and starring Barbie Benton, the film turns medical horror into something dreamlike and disorienting, more fever nightmare than reality. Every hallway looks the same, every face feels slightly off, and the sense of paranoia builds with every scene. What's fascinating about X-Ray is how it merges the early slasher formula with psychological unease. It's bloody and exploitative, sure, but it's also strangely hypnotic, lingering on details that make you feel trapped right alongside the victim. The lighting, the sound, even the hospital machinery itself starts to feel alive. It's not one of the most famous slashers of its era, but it's one of the most memorable in texture. A gleaming antiseptic nightmare that makes you look twice the next time you see an empty hospital hallway at night. Just Before Dawn, 1981. Deep in the Oregon wilderness, 5 young campers discover that some mountains are meant to stay untamed. When they ignore warnings from a crazed local about demons in the woods, they find themselves hunted by something that's both more primitive and more cunning than any backwoods legend. This isn't just another camping trip gone wrong, it's a survival story where civilization's rules mean nothing against ancient savagery. What elevates Just Before Dawn above standard wilderness slashers is director Jeff Lieberman's commitment to atmosphere and environment. The film treats its forest setting with documentary-like attention to detail, making the wilderness itself feel like an alien world hostile to human presence. Fog-shrouded mountains and rushing rivers aren't just backdrops, they're active participants in the horror. The film's antagonists offer a fresh take on the backwoods killer formula. Instead of the standard deformed hillbilly, we get something more primal and unsettling. The way they move through the forest, their ability to mimic sounds, and their almost supernatural understanding of the terrain suggest creatures that have evolved specifically to hunt in these woods. Greg Henry and Chris Lemmon lead a cast that brings surprising depth to what could have been standard victim roles. Their characters feel like real outdoor enthusiasts who make mostly sensible decisions, which makes their situation even more terrifying when those sensible decisions prove useless against an enemy that doesn't play by civilized rules. The kills in Just Before Dawn aren't just about creative gore. They're studies in mounting dread and environmental horror. The film uses its natural setting to full effect, turning familiar outdoor activities like rock climbing and river crossing into sequences of almost unbearable tension. The finale, featuring one of horror's most unique methods of defeating a killer, proves that sometimes survival requires embracing our own primitive instincts. Just Before Dawn reminds us that nature isn't just indifferent to human presence. Sometimes it actively works to expel us, using tools that have been waiting in the mountains since before we learned to make fire. Final Exam, 1981. During exam week at a college campus, students begin dying at the hands of a killer with no clear motive, identity, or explanation. As pranks and parties distract security, real violence escalates quietly. There are no clues to solve, and no mystery to unravel, only the growing realization that someone is killing at random, and no one is prepared to stop it. Directed by Jimmy Houston, Final Exam stands out for what it refuses to provide. The killer has no backstory, no psychology, and no reveal. The ensemble cast portrays recognizable college archetypes, but the film spends more time on everyday interactions than expected, making the sudden violence feel intrusive rather than sensational. The kills are simple and abrupt, stabbings and strangulations, staged with practical effects that favor realism over spectacle. Empty dorms, isolated buildings, and late-night campus spaces become dangerous simply because no one is paying attention. Final Exam divides audiences. Some appreciate its restraint and character focus, while others find it uneventful. Its minimalism is deliberate, stripping the slasher formula to its bare bones. Not flashy, but quietly unsettling in its refusal to explain itself. The Slayer, 1982. 2 couples travel to a remote island getaway, hoping for a peaceful escape. But artist Kay, plagued by recurring nightmares of a monstrous figure, quickly feels unease settling over the desolate landscape. As a storm traps them on the island, her fears take shape, and one by one, Her friends begin to die in ways that eerily match her dreams. Directed by J.S. Cardone, The Slayer is a slow-burn slasher with supernatural undertones, blending psychological dread with bloody payoffs. Sarah Kendall stars as Kay, bringing an intensity to the role of a woman unsure whether she's losing her mind or truly haunted. The supporting cast includes Frederick Flynn, Carol Cottonbrook, and Alan McRae, all playing characters caught in the nightmare's web. The island setting is one of the film's greatest strengths. Abandoned houses, rocky shorelines, and pounding surf create a constant sense of isolation. When the kills arrive, they're brutal and imaginative, delivered with practical effects that linger just long enough to shock without losing their eerie edge. What makes The Slayer distinctive is its blending of slasher mechanics with dreamlike horror. It isn't just about a masked killer. It's about the possibility of nightmares manifesting into reality. That angle gives the film a surreal quality, reinforced by its grim pacing and ominous atmosphere. Though overlooked on release, The Slayer gained cult attention in the VHS market, remembered especially for its unsettling dream logic and the infamous beach house death scene. Today, it stands as one of the era's more unusual slashers. Part psychological study, part supernatural shocker. Those were 10 early 80s slashers that helped shape the boom years, even if they never reached franchise status. Some lean atmospheric, some go brutal, others feel almost dreamlike, but all of them reflect a moment when the genre was exploding with experimentation. If you're digging into the deeper corners of early 80s horror, these are essential stops along the way. Let me know which one stands out to you, or which forgotten slasher you think deserves to be in a future Deep Cuts episode. If you enjoyed this one, hit the like button, subscribe for more Deep Cuts, and check out the playlist on your screen for even more overlooked slashers from the VHS era. Drop a comment and let me know which title you'd resurrect for a future episode.